Brandon Quittem says that Bitcoin will reach a market capitalization of 100 trillion US dollars, which is $5 million per coin. And we are not getting there by ideology, by sovereignty, by any of those very hardcore fundamentals that we all love from Bitcoin. But we are getting there because we are normalizing the asset. We are normalizing that Bitcoin is safe. And we have to build this infrastructure around Bitcoin so people actually feel safe putting their money into Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So the next wave of the Bitcoin buyers, the next wave of getting us from those 64K to 500,000 to a million to 5 million look very different from the buyers that got us from 0 to 64K. And he's connecting all of that with the fourth turning theory. Enjoy. The Bitcoin market couldn't be better for a Bitcoin chat. So how are you looking at the current state of what Bitcoin is doing?
Oh yeah, I mean sentiment is pretty bad. Sentiment always gets bad in bear markets, so I'm trying not to over-index to the current feeling. But I would say Bitcoin Twitter is in as bad a shape as I've ever seen it. And yeah, that means something, but maybe not a lot. However, I think what's really changed in this bear market is simply that the broader market, mostly driven by AI, is doing well. And so if the whole market's going down, like who cares if Bitcoin positions down? But if you see all these AI stocks trading like shitcoins, I think that puts a little more puts a little more emotional pain on this bear market. And so I feel like that's the primary reason that this one's different. I'm not surprised people are coming after Seyr or whatever. When the price is down, people start looking for something to fight about. And yeah, here we are.
And also, this is really interesting because you talked about Seyr. It's this vilifying always. Like in the bear market, I see people want to point their anger to a person, and if it's credible or not, like this is a open discussion. But like, there's always something like we want to blame someone for the Bitcoin price to go down. Is that something that's like common in all the Bitcoin bear markets that you have seen so far?
Yeah, I think people always try and attach a narrative to the price. I think that's just human nature. Why did it go up? Why did it go down? That seems to be the instinctual first question. And yeah, I mean, 2021 peak, obviously we had FTX collapse, so very easy to describe what happened there. 2017 probably just got epically overheated and blow off top style, and then it crumbled. But the previous cycle top, call it, 4 years ago or 3 years ago, that didn't seem to have like a good narrative. And I don't think we had a good narrative for this top either. So in my opinion, the last two cycle tops, 69K and 129, I guess, that didn't feel like the previous era, right? The market just sort of died. There wasn't some giant catalyst. And I think that is a change. Maybe that's just the process of being financialized. So volatility is a little bit compressed up and down. And maybe the retail traders don't push the price into crazy vertical mode because of the institutional investors sort of taking profits on the way, something like that. But to the spirit of your question, yeah, we always seem to put a narrative on it. And people talk about Seyr, but honestly, I think that's crazy to think he caused any sort of bear market. He bought a lot of Bitcoin in the last few years. And so if he wasn't buying, do we think the price would be better off? No, that's crazy. Is he catching flack on the way down? Could he cause the price to drop further if he's a forced seller? Yeah. But if you're going to take him on the upswings, you can't come at him negatively on the downswings. That is the beast. That is what we're dealing with here.
Is it maybe also just that retail itself is a smaller crowd within Bitcoin? Like if you think about the early stages, 2013, it was like mostly retail and very less institutional and companies buying. And now it's becomes a bigger and bigger part of the demand for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Retail does feel like they have less impact on the price, and I think that's inevitable. But if that is true, then we should expect the price to trade a little differently. So it is trading like what you would think. if retail doesn't drive the price as much. And we're even seeing the ETF outflows right now. They're pretty massive this year, right? And so the ETF, most, as far as I understand, the ETF buyers are primarily retail, and primarily retail sells the bottom, which is why we're seeing such an exodus out of the ETFs right now, because they're bad traders. They puke out the bottom, and that is usually when we see the bottom actually form. And so I saw some on-chain analytics, I think it was yesterday, talking about how whales are accumulating. I don't know how much stock to put in that analysis, but if true, I like the narrative, which is that retail pukes the bottom with their ETFs, whales smart money accumulates the bottom in size, and maybe it's not the actual bottom, but they're buying near the lows, I think. And those are good signs if that on-chain analytics is directionally correct.
We talked about it that before we started recording. I would just love for that meme, the 58K gang, to be alive and real, and for that to be the actual bottom of that bear market. Now, when this comes out, maybe it's already no longer the case, but until now, it holds, and it was very close. I think it was, I checked it, it was like $60 above 58K, just like yesterday or like a few days ago. And so like up until now, as what I've seen, it held through, and I would just love for 58K to be the actual bottom of the bear market. Now there's a lot of people that have on-chain analysis and like us way smarter with all those things around like finding not a bottom, but like bottom signals for Bitcoin that might disagree with me. But I just like the vibes of 58K being the bottom for this bear market.
I agree. And I think we shouldn't overlook the mimetic nature here. Like people will meme 58K, it's a known thing. And also it has a lot of historical trading around this price range. And so I really hope we hold 58. If we don't, maybe we, just looking at the chart right now, there's a little time traded at like 51, 52, but not a lot. And after that, 42K looks like support. And so I don't want to go down to 42K. That will be crazy for the vibes. At the same time, like what's going to happen if we hit 42K? All the dumb money, all the hot money will be flushed out, and the rest of the supply will be held in really strong hands if that happens. Hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, Bitcoin's still churning out blocks, no problem. A whole new class of investors got baptized by fire, and we move on from there. One other point, I think, on changes over the years, I do think let's just say like the bottom half of the socioeconomic ladder around the world is in really bad financial shape compared to even like 5-7 years ago. And so I think what that means is there's less investable income for retail, and they make up a smaller percentage of the overall market. So it's kind of double pain there.
What do you think in general are the challenges to the Bitcoin adoption right now?
Yeah. I think one is that the obvious one is that Bitcoin's not the hot chicken town anymore. AI has firmly taken that. And so we're not getting like free attention because we're the volatile asset going up. And so a lot of the punters moved off of Bitcoin. That's one. I think here's a pet idea. So if you look at the Gartner adoption cycle charts, that standard S-curve chart, there's that period between like early majority or maybe it's early adopters and early majority. I don't remember. It's somewhere around like 25% adoption. There's this really hard period where you go from early adopter types to like more normie type people. And that transition is notoriously hard for any technology. And the reason is the early adopters, they will take social risk to go do new things. But the middle of that bell curve, they don't make decisions off of ideology. They don't make decisions because it's cool and new. They make decisions when it's safe, when their peers already made the decision. And that's the transition point that's hard. And with Bitcoin right now, all the rabbit hole chasers, all the INTP, INTJ types, they're already here. And so intellectual, ideological type content is not going to appeal to the next wave of adopters. They just want to buy the thing that's safe that all their peers are interested in. And so the question is, can we as Bitcoiners actually impact that next wave very much? Or does that next wave need to happen simply by slowly becoming more normalized in society? And I lean more towards that second point. And then the question is, if we need to make it feel more normalized, what does that take? How long does that take? And that leads me back to things like ETFs, um, like Saylor's products, like nations buying it, presidents talking about stuff like that. And so that's not a very exciting answer. That might mean we need more time. On the other hand, if we see more money printing going crazy, if we see more like irresponsible federal government stuff, that's another way to draw people in. So it's either pain or like trying to get rich. Those are the primary reasons people adopt Bitcoin, I think. And trying to get rich looks bad right now. So maybe we do need more pain. But to
It is.
summarize, I think the reality is Bitcoin needs to feel more normalized in society to go to the next stage. Part of that's time, part of that's just like standard signals in our day-to-day life.
That's super interesting because I literally talked about what you just said on in Prague on stage, because I was thinking about, okay, how does technology get adopted in not the early stage but like the middle stage, or I don't know if we call it Bitcoin now the middle stage, but where it's no longer the new hot chick in in the market, but it's a little bit more mature, because if the president is talking about it, if there are big publicly traded companies buying it, you can't really make the argument that it's a fully new thing. It already has some kind of maturity. It has $1 to $2 trillion in market cap. That's not nothing. And so if you have that and you want to go beyond, I looked at like many different things, but the main thing actually that pushes innovation forward at that point is infrastructure and the ecosystem around it, rather than the thing itself. One example that is super easy to understand is that I made was the car. We took like 15 years for the car to be adopted, like 1% before we really did anything. And then like in 15 years, another 15 years, we adopted it like with 70-80%. There's this famous New York picture with like left and right 13 years, and there's like one horse and a bunch of cars. And before 13 years was like a bunch of horses and just one car. And the main difference was like there was no gas stations, infrastructure, the paved roads, all of those things were not there anymore, not there before. And so I think infrastructure and ecosystem and building those financial instruments out is a very boring answer. But this actually brings us, I think, to not 1%, 3% adoption, but like 10, 50, 60, 70% adoption, and unlocks the bigger capital pools.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I love the horse to car analogy. There's so many fun anecdotes with society grappling with new technology. Like electricity is going to kill everyone. All those funny ads of people walking outside and touching a light pole and everyone's getting electrocuted. And with the horse one, I looked at these little anecdotes a while back. They're so funny. One of them, cars would drive by and people would shout on the street, "Hey, get a horse!" Stuff like that. And the cities were trying to slow it down, or they were scared of the new tech or whatever. And so they would force the early automobiles to have like a driver, a passenger, and someone with a flag walking in front of the car, like making sure people know a car's coming and waving a flag to get out of the way. And good parallels with Bitcoin, right? Like if you're watching your purchasing power get inflated away, like obviously Bitcoin makes sense for most people. And yet we have all these anti-technology critiques floating around that are just standard, we're scared of new stuff critiques. And we just, as a species, we don't learn this lesson. Like, right, what is the lesson of history? That we don't learn the lessons of history. We keep falling into the same traps. And yeah, I think that's quite funny. And to summarize our previous argument, I think the densest way to say it is Bitcoin's at the end of the beginning. That beginning phase is done. we're entering the the beginning of the end, or whatever you want to say. And so, yeah, there we are.
Yeah, I literally, like, the first time I heard about that Red Flag Act was, I think, 2, 3, or 4 months ago, somewhere, and I couldn't believe it. I looked it up and I was like, that was a real thing. Someone had to walk in front of the car. The car was not allowed to drive faster than 4 kilometers per hour, like 4 miles per hour, and someone had to wave in front of the car and saying, like, there's a car coming, attention. And I'm like, of course, if you have that. And the funny thing is, that was not a quick law. It was not there for like a year. It was there for 31 years in Britain. That was a long thing. And this was actually there before the first actual car, like the car that we know it, came on the market, because there was the steam engine cars beforehand, and the railway companies kind of lobbied for that for that law not to be implemented. And it's actually one of the reasons why I think the social layer of Bitcoin is more important than we think, because yeah, Bitcoin will succeed, I think, no matter what. But in your jurisdiction, Bitcoin might have really weird and bad laws coming with it, and so it hinders and hampers the adoption in that very specific jurisdiction, and so you can be affected. And so that's why it's, I think, very, very important to be politically active, be a voice in the space, saying like, hey, I want Bitcoin is amazing, and I love Bitcoin. Like, don't hide from that, because people, like, Bitcoiners like to hide their conviction because they're afraid of things, which there's nothing really wrong with that. I just like think, if you have strong conviction, like, speak out and make yourself heard, because it might just be more important than you think.
I think that's a really profound point you made there. Personally, my politics changed quite a bit coming into Bitcoin. I used to think that I should just vote harder, and that the people just need to be more educated and vote harder to change the world. And I became very disillusioned by that idea. So then I swung the opposite direction to Bitcoin. Don't vote harder, change the world with new technology, right? You can insert a Bucky Fuller quote if you want. But what's interesting there is, we shouldn't take the position that don't do anything, fuck the banks, fuck the state, like, we're just gonna come and take it, like that type of ideology. That's fine. That's like a core ethos in Bitcoin, and at the macro scale, I think that that's generally true for Bitcoin. But your point on jurisdictional differences is very profound. In the US right now, we're seeing a massive rise in socialism and different policies that are eroding property rights that would seem insane even like 10 years ago, like the California wealth tax, just taking a percentage of your assets, or the Illinois bill they're trying to pass now, where if you move Bitcoin in any capacity, you owe 0.2% to the state of Illinois. That means if I move Bitcoin from my hot wallet to my cold wallet, like putting $5 from one pocket to the other pocket, the state wants 2.2% from that. These are insane things. And we're seeing a massive exodus out of blue states who are implementing crazy rules, honestly. And they're all flowing into states that adopt more of a freedom mindset: Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, Florida. And so, yeah, at least in the US, people can sort of vote with their feet. That's not available to everyone. It's expensive to move, but hopefully the states get the message that these laws actually hurt on net. They hurt them. Yeah, maybe you fleece a few billionaires, but 90% of the billionaires just move their jurisdiction. So you're actually a net loss in tax revenue. And yeah, all I can hope is the pain from the socialist policies is realized quickly, so that we can change course here.
We Bitcoiners always preach not your keys, not your coins, but we're giving away all our data to the big tech servers. Your passwords, your identity, your accounts. That's why I personally switched away and started using Proton Pass. Everything is end-to-end encrypted, so not Proton and not anyone else can read your data. And look how simple this is. I just click here once on the login button, and I automatically get the passkey sign-in from Proton Proton. With just one click on it, I'm signed in. And of course, it also stores all the two-factor authentication codes. And if my credentials ever show up in a data breach, it warns me so I can act very fast. If you care about holding your own Bitcoin, you should also care about holding the control of your own data. It's the same fight. And the best part is you're not sacrificing your convenience. It's privacy and security by default, and you can start for free right now. And if you want to upgrade to Proton Plus, you get that for just $1 for your first month. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment down below. So go to proton.me/pass/Robin Seyr. Make sure you close your digital front door. It takes you 5 minutes and €0 to start with. Again, that's proton.me/pass/Robin Seyr. How do you feel about, because jurisdictions always seem to do that, like the jurisdiction that are doing really well because they had those kind of like hard times and they like create good times because the people lived through that, and now they're doing really good. And if everyone is doing really good, this creates like more softer people, a little bit weaker people. They like all of a sudden think about socialist things and like free trains and like weird things like that, and like what the gender of the person in the traffic lights should be. Like really like things that really don't matter, at least not for me. And then it's like slowly coming down again because they're like wealth taxes and all of that, because then all of a sudden the people that built that in that country, they are the ones that are leaving again. They're the ones that are saying, "Hey, I don't want that anymore. For my input, I want a good amount of output. I don't want to put that into the state. I don't want to put that in this weird jurisdictional thing." And so I think that's just a normal thing that always happens. I'm just really curious how this on a bigger stage will look like, because there's always this, like now America is huge, but this was like different jurisdictions back in the days. How do you think about the global kind of shift that we are seeing? Is America safe from that? is safe from like not just like inside America, but like most America maybe moving to a more socialist, more China way of thinking?
Yeah, big question here. So let's bring a little history, because I think a lot of people will say, especially more market-driven people in the US, let's say, or wherever, people would say, hey, socialism's bad. We know this. We have many examples. You know, we need incentives. We need markets. That is how you drive society forward, etc. And then you might say, well, why are young people going crazy with socialism? Are they uneducated? Do they not understand their history? And I think, again, to history, in the 1930s, we had the exact same thing happen. So on the tail end of the 1929 stock market crash and the Great Depression in the US, we had essentially a decade of really bad economic position for the people. If you put all the people in that situation, they look around, they say, wait a minute, the social contract here is broken. So they try to find a scapegoat. And the easy and lazy and, I would say, incorrect answer is to blame things on capitalism, right? But it's easy and people do it. And there was a huge rise in communism and socialism in the US in the 1930s. In fact, the educated, what we now call the coastal elites, right? Like the overeducated intelligentsia, business leaders, artists, etc. They were all communist socialists. That was the cool thing to do. And during that decade, our politics reflected some of that. FDR took over during that period, and he was like a extremely powerful, had a lot of power for a president, like the last dictator, I would say, since. And what happened? Massive changes went through. So we got FDIC insurance. Oh, your money's gone at the bank. Okay, we'll create a federal program to insure the banks. Oh, you lost your income and you can't feed yourself at the end of life. Okay, we'll create Social Security. Okay, we'll create all these different social programs to respond to the previous crisis. And they took a more socialist, communist flavor. And so I think we need to understand that humanity's been here before. This is a natural response to the social contract being broken. And so we need to empathize with young people they're incorrect, but they're right to be upset and they're right to look for an alternative. And I don't know how that's going to play out. It feels like that movement is growing. Young people can't afford homes. They're in debt up to their eyeballs. They'll never be able to afford the house that they grew up in. And that, yeah, that just creates bad conditions. And so my fear is that we're going to go through another period like the 1930s. We're going to have things like free education, something to do with housing, AI tax, wealth tax, like all those things are going to be popular until the social contract changes. And to be honest, it doesn't look like we're getting out of that environment anytime soon. It seems like the whole entire world is betting on AI productivity outgrowing our debt problem. Um, I think that's probably our best chance, but it's not a very rosy situation. And currently, AI has a massive PR problem with that same underclass. And so even though it's our best chance to get out of this, it's being fought against by the people who need improvement, which is kind of a funny paradox.
Is that the kind of the fourth turning thesis playing out?
Yeah, exactly. In the fourth turning, we end up in these conditions. You mentioned hard times create good men create good times create weak men. And it's very clear that the US is experiencing some late stage stuff there where things were so good for so long that we created a society that is weak, a society that doesn't have what we would have historically called like real problems, like creating a family and having some food and just the basics covered. We're way past that. And so now we have to invent new social problems to keep us occupied. And it's very painful to see. But yeah, this is what happens in a fourth turning. And during fourth turnings, we end up redoing the social contract, rebuilding our institutions, and trying to level the playing field again so we can have more harmony in society. And to me, the biggest variable to watch for is, do young people have hope about the future? And right now, it's very clearly that the answer is no. I was born in '88, so I'm more of a kid of the '90s. But I remember future being optimistic. We're going to space, we're getting the internet, we're getting all this cool stuff. And young people had a lot of optimism. And you talk to young people today, and that's not true. And so yeah, until that shifts, we're gonna have very serious social problems. And, at the end of every fourth turning so far, we've had total war. And it could be total war abroad against an enemy. It could be something more like the Civil War. It could be a Cold War situation with China, sort of like redoing the global map. But either way, I have my eye set on conflict being the end of this fourth turning. When could that be? I would say within 5 to 7 years, we should be done with this fourth turning, assuming the historical cycles play out. But that also means we still have a lot more pain to go through. And that's my base case here. And not great, but I think that's the right way to look at it.
It's so sad that people don't have hope, because there's so much new thing. Like there's so much to be optimistic about. If you think about how good we have it right now compared to like any other part of history, you can just like board in a plane. We literally just looked at like holiday options, and I was so fascinated by how cheap you can go somewhere really beautiful, go with like 2 hour plane ride there for like, I don't know, $50 per person. And it's just like you go there, you're in a whole different country, and you can rent a scooter there and just drive around for really cheap. Like, think about that. 1,000 years, nobody could have even done that because there was no plane, there was no internet to easily book it. Like, there was none of that shit. And now we have it so easy. And there's AI coming that helps you along the way. There is all the past innovation of the internet. Now there's Bitcoin, where you can take your things in your the financial energy in your own hands. It's like, how how can you be negative in those environments?
100%, I agree. The Bitcoin perspective here is that you find hope with the fact that we have a way to redo the money in the world. And we have hope because you can change your personal financial situation in a way that you didn't think was possible prior. And so, yeah, I think Bitcoiners are uniquely optimistic about the future. And I would say the AI community is split. There's like the doomer camp that says if we keep going, we're all dead. We're going to create a paperclip maximizer or whatever. The other half of the AI is like, yeah, this is going to bring mass abundance, post scarcity world, right? Polar opposite perspectives there. But the average person, I think it's really rational where they came to because they don't have economic prospects. And that is the foundation of the American myth or dream or American ideal, whatever you want to call it. It's founded on individuals can create value and change their lot in life. And if the average person doesn't feel a sense of that, I think it's natural for them to push back. Um, on the point on it's objectively better now, I think that that's clearly true. And the average middle class American has more luxuries than a king 500 years ago. Those type of comparisons I think are real. I think one tricky part here with humans, though, is our software tells us to be to compare things relatively, not in absolute terms. So in absolute terms, we're way better off. It's impossible to argue the opposite. But in relative terms, we're staring at our little black mirrors all day and we see Elon Musk has $1 trillion. That's not fair. And so we complain about it. We scroll Instagram and we see people going on lavish vacations and we feel bad about ourselves. Even though our vacations may be less sexy than the other one we saw on the internet, it's still a better opportunity than what our parents had or our parents' parents going down the line. And so, yeah, I think there's a little bit of human nature getting in the way. Like there was a study where it said, I'm going to get it slightly wrong, but I'll get the gist right. It's like, would you rather make twice as much money and be the poorest person in your neighborhood? Or would you rather make 10% less money, but be the richest person in your neighborhood? And people actually choose a relative advantage over their peers. They rank that higher than an absolute advantage, an absolute increase in your pay. And so I think just using that plus the internet makes people not accept the fact that these are good times, right? And I also think during fourth turnings, and we all feel this, everything's hyper politicized. And why is that? Well, because the reality is no one's optimistic. And so it feels like every decision is catastrophic because our lives aren't going very good. And so it puts more emphasis on politics to improve our lot in life. And so I think it's entirely rational that everything's political. But what it also means is that if everything's political, you're going to get people voting against their ideals in a way that's quite crazy. Because your team says one thing, you got to adopt your team's policy. And I don't think political overlords have our best interests in mind, essentially ever. They have their best interests in mind, and that sometimes overlaps with their constituents. But essentially, we're just blowing in this political shitstorm, and it's bad for social harmony as well. Like when I grew up, no one knew the politics of their neighbors, and it didn't matter what their politics were. Now everyone puts a little sign in their yard, on their car, on their clothing, the way they talk. We're always social signaling which group we're a part of. And that creates a really weird tension in the US. I don't know how that feels in Europe, but I think Balaji had a quote where it was like, we don't have one country in the US, we have two parties. And I think that feels increasingly true every day. And that is not a very durable populace. That's not a durable society. And so that puts small risks could have catastrophic outcomes. And I don't think a civil war in the US is out of the question. It's not going to be like a North versus South type thing, but like a left versus right, nationalism versus socialism. I think that's actually the battle lines now. I think MAGA took over the Republican Party, and I think that socialists are going to take over the Democratic Party. And that's a weird place to be.
What does that all mean for Bitcoin?
Good question. I think the socialist side, the more power they have, I think that they will demonize wealth and erode property rights at a rate we've never seen before. And so I think that's bad for Bitcoin. I think on the nationalist side, I think it's loosely aligned with property rights and capitalism. So I think that that's a better outcome for Bitcoin. But the more the sides are fighting, the more the pendulum's going to swing. Like Trump family enriched themselves to the tune of billions. I don't know the number, but saw the charts flowing around. And they did some really scammy stuff with the meme coins and all their token stuff. And so if the socialists gain power in the next election cycles coming up here, they're definitely going to be using that to say, see, crypto's a scam, Bitcoin's a scam. We have to demonize this. It's not fair. And so I would say, on the other hand, the socialists will print a lot of money. And so I think there'll be more attacks from a state and federal level with policy against Bitcoin. But I also think the money printer will be going just as much as honestly, left and right are going to print the money. So maybe that point's a wash.
Yeah, like there's this amazing chart of how much money each president is printing, and the bars of the charts are colored either red or blue, and they're like just equally getting worse over time. They're just like getting bigger no matter who's in charge, because I think it's a structural problem. I mean, Elon Musk, the guy that landed rockets, did all that crazy shit with his companies. He couldn't stop the government from spending more money. Like he tried, and he was, he almost blew Tesla up on got demonized. Like I think a lot of people try to kill him. Like he really put himself in a very tough spot just to like try to save. So try to do something very reasonable, like get less spending of the state while the income of the state like stays the same. Like it's, I think, a very reasonable thing to do, like not to add to the debt problem. But like he got pushed away from the political layer like very fast.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The thing with Elon is he's kind of a hype man marketer first. And so you gotta like take a grain of salt with his actions. Like, what is his real motivation there? I think he just got disenchanted by how much of a mess it was and how problem there was to solve. But I'm not 100% sure that's what he's doing. Whatever, side note. But I think your point is sound. Like structurally, we have a problem. And it seems like the federal government was not set up to police where these funds are going. And so we created a system where people in the beginning weren't taking full advantage of it. And then you just fast forward over time, people get more desperate. We import people from other countries. They find creative ways to fleece the government, and we just let it happen. That's like the charitable side. We weren't set up to prevent it. The less charitable side is that, the US government directly or indirectly employs a very large percentage of the people. I don't remember the number, but it's like 30 to 50% of Americans are getting paid directly or indirectly from the state. And that essentially means the economy is actually in very bad shape. So the job growth comes from the federal government, which then demands more spending, right? It's like the kick the can down the road, just hire people from the federal government so we don't realize the pain. But every time you do that, there's less real value being created every day, which demands more spending. And so, we're a heroin addict taking bumps of whatever opiate to keep us going along, but it just delays the pain a little bit further. And I think that's the nature of government. And that's why we have these epic blowups from time to time, because no one's willing to take the hard stance and go through the pain. And so, get your popcorn ready, fill your cold card up, have your backup plan, don't blow up. And also, all this chaos aside, like get outside, touch the grass, spend time with your family. You don't need to be glued to the internet during this period. You can also just build your life locally and focus on the things that actually matter. And, that might change your whole perspective on this chaos period and ride it out with the fam.
I noticed that Twitter is very specifically bad for your mental health.
Yes.
Even though it's a fun place to be, and if you enjoy in doses, it can be a really nice experience. But also, if you're not careful, you are getting enraged and emotional about things that don't really matter at all.
Yes.
You're just like, oh, like why is that? I'm like, oh, like it doesn't really matter. Like it, who cares? So just a note on the internet, like especially Twitter, it has this weird power to like suck you into fights and conflicts. And if you are all day on Twitter, you feel like the whole world is fighting with each other. Then you're going away just from that one platform, just like go outside, like see some people, go in a park, like go in a forest, like just somewhere where people are acting normal. And you're like, yeah, actually, like people are just living their lives and are happy and fun, and you can just do the things.
That's a really, really good point. And to add an evolutionary biology angle here, our human meat suit, our hardware, like how we were evolved, took place in a period where we lived in small kin groups of, let's say, 50 to 150 humans. You knew everyone. That is your that is your group. Those are your people. So all of our hopes, fears, wishes, dreams, like how we respond to the world, it was all forged during that period. And so we essentially have archaic man emotional capacity, and we're just dropped in this future state where we have 24 access to the entire world from our phone all day, every day, instant understanding of the world. And we are not evolved to handle that. We can't tell the difference. If we scroll on Twitter and see a bomb drop somewhere around the world, our body doesn't know the difference between that and a tiger trying to eat us, right? So we put ourselves in this chronic high cortisol, stressed out fight or flight state. And it's simply because the technology is far advanced beyond our meat suit. And so what does that mean? Doesn't mean we're going to get rid of the technology. That never happens. It means humans have to be very intentional in how we accept new technology into our life. I don't want to get rid of the internet. I don't want to get rid of Twitter. But if I'm not mindful of my consumption, it's clearly bad for people. And I think mental health around the world is at a very, very, very precarious spot. In the US, like crazy numbers of people are on pharmaceuticals all day, every day for mental health issues. And yeah, like essentially society has evolved to a point where our meat suits aren't ready, and we have to take that point and use it and do something about it. And the good news is it's almost entirely solved by the fundamentals. It's have a community of people you like. It's get sunshine, get good sleep, reduce stress. It is all the fundamental stuff to make our meat suit happy. That's really all we have to do. A simple solution, but clearly not easy.
With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control. And I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. A question that I think a lot about, because like if you're longer in Bitcoin and maybe even did investing beforehand already. You lived through ups and downs in stocks. You lived through ups and downs in Bitcoin, and I've kind of lost the connection to what it is like to be the first time in a crash. So I held Tesla way before I held Bitcoin, and Tesla crashed so many times, and it kind of hardened me when I even got into Bitcoin. Then I got into Bitcoin in 2020, like lived through the 2021 like huge blow off top, and then like the bear market, I think, I don't know, 75% or something like that. And so I've lived through that, and now like 50% down, it doesn't really feel bad. It's just like, yeah, okay, 50% down, it is what it is. But what would you tell to people that like it's for them it's the first time or not that easy? What are you doing to like make it through a bear market, through a crash of like not just like only on the mindset perspective, but maybe also like tactical things like holding a I don't know, emergency funds, or like doing all the works that makes a bear market makes a bear market better for you as a Bitcoiner?
Yeah, it's a good question. Super practical. I'm with you. I went through the 17, 2021, and now this crash. And emotionally, I honestly don't feel affected by it day to day. So that's easy for me to say if you're new and you're freaking out right now. I went through that also, and all Bitcoiners do. That's just the initiation, I think. But on the practical side, I think the most important thing to be aware of in bear markets is don't sell the bottom. And how do you avoid selling the bottom? Don't take leverage at the top. Make sure you have a little cash buffer. Don't get in a situation where you misplanned your taxes and now you got to liquidate Bitcoin to cover your taxes, right? There's all these little traps. I've fallen into them. I know many, many, many people who own way less Bitcoin than they should because they didn't plan for this. And so I think the key is whatever you can do to avoid selling the bottom. And for some people, that actually means holding a little bit less of your wealth in Bitcoin. And I know that's sacrilegious to the OG, hodl, maxi, laser crowd, whatever, which I emerged from. So I'm not knocking that perspective. But the reality is, if you're over holding Bitcoin, your margin for error at the bottom is really large. If you lose your job in the bear market, you're going to sell Bitcoin. That's not a good situation to be in. And so that means being a little bit less aggressive when the price is going up, a little more conservative, I should say. And I think that'll treat you better long term, because this is a long term game. If Bitcoin is what we say it is, there is 100x left here. Timing, who knows? But like at maturity, I do expect something between 50 and 100 trillion. And so if that's true, whatever you can do now to not lose your position is the key. So don't get overextended. Don't take debt. Play a little bit more defensive. And I think that's true in fourth turnings. I think that's good advice. I think that's great advice for Bitcoiners. And we've all seen our friends who come in, they buy the top of their first cycle. 6 months later, it's down 60 to 80%. They freak out and they sell it. And if they would have held for another year, they would have been up on their position, yet they make the mistake over and over and over again. So shepherd your new coiners well, make sure they internalize the information, and don't get overextended. And maybe that means holding less Bitcoin, especially if you have a family. Like I keep a bigger cash position now than I have in previous cycles, because I have more people to take care of and a higher risk of having to dip into Bitcoin savings to cover some unexpected expense. Just don't put yourself in that situation.
It's so interesting because I've seen it so many times where people that get liquidated make some big mistake in the bear market. They usually make that mistake already in the bull market because they got too greedy. They don't have a cash reserve. They might even take a leverage. That's one of the most riskiest things you can do if Bitcoin is up big time and you're like, oh, I want to maximize my Bitcoin return, so I'm just borrowing against my Bitcoin and buying more Bitcoin, and then it crashes down 50-60%. You don't have any collateral to post, you get liquidated. I mean, we've seen that playbook play out a lot of times, and unfortunately I even seen it play out with friends of mine in actual life. It's a horrible story, and it's just greed at the end of the day. So like, oh, I have to get to 1 Bitcoin, I have to get to 10 Bitcoin, I have to get to 7.893 Bitcoin, whatever your number is. Like, maybe instead of getting to 1 Bitcoin, getting to 0.7 Bitcoin and having a cash buffer is better, because you're not losing a 1 Bitcoin in the bear market when it's like 40K instead of you bought it at like, I don't know, 120K. Like, it's very simple, having some cash reserves, and Bitcoin always dips. Like, I think we will never be at the point where we reach a point and Bitcoin just like goes up to the moon till like 10 million. There will always be those corrections, because corrections might be smaller, but there will always be corrections.
That's right. And you know, I wish someone had a simulator so you could see how having a cash position or don't get overextended actually results in more Bitcoin, because people think it's counterintuitive. And I think you're right. The greed is the factor that pushes people over the edge. But all the OG hodlers will tell you the same advice, that they have less Bitcoin than they should because of these same mistakes. So it's, evergreen advice. Bitcoin is ruthless and it rewards the patient. It doesn't reward the aggressive hot money.
I couldn't find it now, but we made a video on that with Stephen Perrinot, the guy from the Power Law, and he calculated with many simulations over the last, I think he went back 10 years, what is the perfect Bitcoin allocation so you can maximize Bitcoin. And in his simulation, I don't recommend doing that, but he even kept Bitcoin versus cash always at 75 to 25%. So like 75 Bitcoin, 25% cash. And when it went up, he sold Bitcoin, put it into cash. When Bitcoin went down, he had to sell cash to buy Bitcoin, if that makes sense. And so if that is the simulation 10 years, and just keeping it at 75%, always the allocation actually shaked out to be better for the long-term return than just DCAing at like all the time. Now, I'm not a fan of selling Bitcoin, so I'm more of a fan of like do with your new income that split of like, if you have like, let's say 80% Bitcoin, 20% other stuff, and your Bitcoin rips up and it's 90%, don't sell your Bitcoin. Just like the income, put it in your cash and rather than into Bitcoin, which is hard to do, because when it goes up, this is the time everyone is telling you to buy. Everyone is like bullish, like, oh, we're going to 100K, 200K, 300K, and you see all that bullish news, and then the emotions get in there. And so, be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy, kind of a thing.
100%. Yeah, if I look back in my Bitcoin history, the best buys I ever made were the ones when I was shitting myself. Like, oh my God, Bitcoin's over, liquidate my cash reserve. They feel so bad in the moment. And you look back, like, that's where all the gains come from. The buys that feel so good, those are always the ones that you got to wait 5 years until you're happy with the returns. And so, yeah, it's counterintuitive. That's really interesting on the 75-25. So just so I understand it, they say like daily rebalance or monthly rebalance or whatever, the 75-25. So essentially at the top, you're shaving your Bitcoin position, building up your cash. And then at the bottom, you actually get to buy a whole lot more because you already shaved your position. So on net, it outperforms. That makes sense. That's intuitive. But I'm with you. Like, I don't like shaving at the top.
I couldn't do it.
Go down.
No, like it's hard to do for me. It does make sense if you think about it, because Bitcoin is so volatile, and especially for something really volatile, if it goes up like crazy, 10, 20, 30%, you take the profit, put it into cash, and then when it goes down massively, you have to replenish and you have to try powder all of a sudden, and
Yep.
like you can actually buy it, and if it goes down further, you have to buy again because you have to keep the balance, and it goes down further, you have to keep the balance. So I actually forgot which was the cadence of, like, was it weekly, daily, or monthly that he rebalanced that stuff. But it was really interesting for me to see like the 75% thing. I keep it currently, I try to keep it as like 80%, and then in the other 20% they have some strategy and some cash. So I'm probably more like 90%,
Yeah.
92%, because strategy is not really a cash position. It's it's even worse from the volatility than Bitcoin.
That's right.
So, but yeah, it's I should take the advice from my podcast guest and be more a bit bigger cash position, but it's really hard currently.
It is really hard. And imagine if everyone did that. Like, that's essentially how most institutions deal with Bitcoin, right? And so what would we expect if everyone did that strategy? The volatility would go down a lot because everyone would be selling into the pumps and buying into the dumps, and all of a sudden Bitcoin performs like the NASDAQ instead of like penny stocks.
I want to talk about one last thing, because you brought it up with Seyr and strategy before, and we talked about adoption. And I think we talked about the infrastructure and how strategies, preferred stocks, and like what they're doing might be a part of that. How do you actually look at treasury companies about that locked capital they're trying to gather, that preferred stocks, the bonds that they're trying to like get in there? What is kind of the vision for that whole space for you?
Yeah, so I think, well, number one, let's just set the table here. Strategy is taking the most heat right now, probably since they were adopting Bitcoin. And you could say, is there something wrong with their strategy? Is it good or bad for Bitcoin? Like, all those questions are being brought up. And I think the reality is, if Bitcoin is the money we thought it was going to be, that this stage was inevitable. This is a sign of maturity. This is a sign of winning. Now, it doesn't mean it feels good. Actually, this morning on Twitter, I was talking to Fernando, former Blockstream. Now he built an AI data pipe company, and we were lamenting the loss of our previous content era. Let's say 2018 to 2021 or something like that. The content was amazing. It's philosophical, it's deep, it's creative, it's ideological. It was fun. And now you see essentially none of that content. You see price charts and digital credit analysis and all this other stuff. And personally, I don't like the communication or the community vibes as much, not even close. But I think it is true that that is a sign of maturity. And so I think people need to just realize that the ideology that got us to this point is now diluted, and that's just a reality. And so we should expect some, rankled OGs or rankled laser eyes, whatever you want to call it. And I think, yeah, that's natural. That's what we're doing. Now, specifically, what do I think about strategy? I think they're a giant accumulator. They're clearly net positive for Bitcoin. And I think the STRC and other preferreds are good products. I just checked the STRC. It's close to 90 now, after going down to like 70, whatever. And so I don't feel the same animosity towards Seyr. I don't have the same fear. I don't think they're blowing up. Could they sell some Bitcoin? Sure. But I think it's immature to say anything other than that's net positive. Now, on the other hand, you could say, well, the marketing engine around these products and around treasury companies in general, that took a lot of demand away from spot, and that hurt the Bitcoin price on the margin. I think that's 100% true, especially like last summer, fast money chasing all the treasury stocks. They go parabolic, and now they're like down 90% probably as a category. And so, yeah, it hurt individual investors, and it temporarily took marginal demand away from spot. So yeah, sure, on the margin, it hurt a little bit. But the net accumulation from strategy is so large that I think it overpowers any of those little narratives. And so to me, it feels more like people grappling with the fact that Bitcoin has changed on its adoption curve, and that feels bad. And people probably feel betrayed because the Bitcoin conversation now is not why they joined. And so I think it's natural for people to reject that. But I think it's a temporary phase. I think it's an emotional reaction rather than a logical reaction here. And I think in 5 years, the arguments we're having now around strategy are going to be mute, and Bitcoin keeps churning out blocks, and the number's going to keep going up.
I just look at the chart of strategy. They actually went down. If you take the high and the low, now we're a little bit higher again. They went down 82% in this bear market, which is a lot more than Bitcoin. And Bitcoin went down about 50%. The strategy went down over 80%. Is still down. The past 1 year, like 73%, even with that recent uptick that they have, at least today and like I think Monday, so might be just completely gone again when this comes out. Let's see where the Bitcoin price goes. But it is really interesting for me to think about, because on the one hand, obviously, you get a lot of bad rep, and of course the Bitcoin content is very different now. Even if there's like a Saylor 1.0 or Saylor 2.0 discussion, it's like Saylor right now talking on a podcast is very different than it was 2024, 2023, 2022. It's now all about, I had Saylor on 2024 in summer, and I asked him about like, hey, what's the vision of strategy, and he didn't even really wanted to talk about it. He's like, yeah, like strategy will do the things, and like then he talked about Bitcoin again. So we're like 1.5 hours Bitcoin, and like maybe 5% of the time we talked briefly about strategy. Now it's like mostly about strategy, mostly about digital credit, digital capital, all of those things. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a sign of maturity and a sign that like where the buck is going, where are we kind of ending up towards. But yeah, I think I can get people, like, because I came into Bitcoin in 2020, so I got that period really hard of like the content was very different back then for me as a consumer than it is right now what people are interested in. I see the numbers. People are also interested in different things, like the majority of people. If I post something more philosophical, more like just like what more philosophical, more things like that, it gets less attention than we talk the whole time about strategy and like what they're doing with stretch and like all of those things, because people are invested and therefore interested in the stock and what they're doing. And then like it's interesting, and they have to kind of look at it to see, is it still doing good? Is it still doing bad? And every day you could literally make a podcast every single trading day around just strategy, because there's so much things currently going on in the stock. I mean, Adam Livingston, I guess, does that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's well said. I also think some of the blame on the content and the vibe or whatever on Twitter is because Elon radically changed the Twitter algorithm. So it used to be the case that my feed would have like mid-tier engagement posts on those philosophical topics with good discussion. That happened every day for years. Now it seems like your tweets either go to no people whatsoever, or they go mega viral. And if it goes mega viral out of your like sphere, the discussion's gone. It's just like normies screeching on whatever opinions. And so what does that do? It means our feeds are filled up with the hyper viral stuff, which is almost always commentary on the latest thing or price driven hyperbole. Right. And so I think part of the reality is I think there's more demand for the philosophical than we are experiencing. Maybe that's another way to say it, but our feeds don't show it. And so I think that's part of why people like the Nostra experience. It feels more like the old community vibe, more insular, more space for those mid-tier philosophical posts because the algorithm's not as tweaked. And so, yeah, that's just shower thought on this one that I think does contribute.
Do you think Nostra has a future?
I think at a minimum, it's a really good backup plan if communication platforms continue to erode. Like, yeah, we need a backup plan. Otherwise, the digital panopticon could close around us. Like, seeing people in the UK go to jail for liking memes or posting political memes is so insane. And if that trend continues, I think the need for something like Nostr goes up. But I wouldn't say I would like bet the farm on Nostr winning here. Like, I don't know. It's always going to be a niche platform at a minimum. It's a good backup plan. Do I see it taking over the digital square that Twitter has a stranglehold on now? No, I don't. Network effects are powerful and people like convenience, and it's really hard to take away the network effect from Twitter. And so I don't see it happening. Now, there could be a world where Twitter becomes like a digital credit score system. It's Alley Chat, WePay, there's banking there, everything's on there, and all of a sudden the political cost for speaking out is too great, so you get censored or whatever. Yeah, that'll drive people to Nostr, but the average person doesn't care about those things, unfortunately. And it's the same with self-custody. Like I used to believe a much higher percentage of people would want to self-custody their coins, but I think the reality is no, maybe 5% of people will want to do that at maturity. Now, that sounds pretty bad, but I also think a large percentage of the coins, even if a small percentage of the users, will end up in self-custody. And so I think that's an acceptable place to be. I don't think that's an existential threat, but I think it's accepting reality and doing what we can to make self-custody easy, but knowing that most people won't choose that.
There is, how to frame that, because I like the idea of Nostra, so it's hard for me to like say something negative, but I think I have to, because I see one major problem with Nostra is there is nobody massively curating the content, which people love. Like the few people that are on it, they love that, but it has a huge problem. People don't spend that much time on the platform. So even the most Nostra crazy people, they go away after some time. They kind of like, I've talked to a lot of people that are also Nostra, and they don't have those crazy time on the platform like the crazy Twitter people have. And so overall, there is no algorithm that keeps you hooked in the platform, which is the very thing that Nostra people like kind of advertise on. Like that's a good thing, but I think it's a incentive problem long term for keeping people on Nostra. And there's, I think Matt Odell came back to Twitter. There's people that say like, "Oh, I'm done with Twitter. I go only to Nostra," and then coming back to Twitter eventually, because it's just such a huge network effect, and there's like a huge team that is just there for figuring out what to do with the content that they have on the platform. And so that I think is not an existential threat, but is a major incentive problem for the Nostra platform. Now, on the other part, I think it's amazing that it exists because of one major reason. When the other platforms get too sensory, too bad, we have an exit valve. We have somewhere where people can go for the freedom aspect of Bitcoin, freedom aspect of social media. And just the existence of Nostra and other protocols like that will make other social media platforms more free. Because if they do something really bad, people are opting out. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. If people if they print crazy amounts of money, the stock market is not doing good, there's an alternative with Bitcoin where people can go in there. So the crazier the system gets, the more the alternative gets attractive. Now with Bitcoin, it's a little bit different because Bitcoin has actually good incentives. People get hooked there and like stay in that ecosystem. Not the same way with Nostra. But that's kind of how I look at it. I see a major incentive problem with people not staying on the platform. which like you can make the argument is good for you as an individual because you spend more time in real life, but it is a problem for the platform itself.
Yeah, I did not know that about Nostr, but intuitively makes sense, right? Like the town square is Twitter. That's where things break. That's where Bitcoin intersects with the quote unquote real world. That's where you get to dunk on bad takes for sport. Like that all happens there. So my guess is even the Nostr advocates, they still moonlight on Twitter and they probably spend more time on Twitter, even though they ideologically would like to say that they don't. They probably post more on Nostr and consume more on Twitter. That would be my guess. But I do like your point. It does serve as a pressure release valve or a counter force that keeps the centralized platforms more honest because there is an easy off ramp. Just like with Bitcoin, if your state prints too much money, on the margin, the citizens will shift assets to Bitcoin. And so, yeah, the counter force is massive. And yeah, like network effects are hard, man. As much as I would love Nostr to win, good luck.
That's true. I have one last topic before we get to our end routine. It's it's a difficult topic because people are very upset about it. But when you previously talked about civil war and like the fourth turning and all of those things, I couldn't stop thinking about knots versus core. Like people are emotional. They want you to pick a side and all of those things. I'm pretty neutral on that whole thing, and I get there's a week where I get attacked by the core people, and there's a week where I get attacked by the knots people, because I make observations on both sides, and then I get attacked from both sides. I like my position. As someone told me, if you're between two extremist sides and both hate you, you might just be in a good spot. But how do you look at that civil war? I don't know if it's a civil war, but how do you think about that issue between core versus knots? That is, as if you just look on Twitter, a very pressing issue. If you look outside of Twitter, maybe not as much.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even look at it. My overall philosophy with Bitcoin is of extreme conservatism. I want the platform to change as little as possible. And I think it's natural that there's going to be rifts over time, and some of those rifts end up in forks. I think I've just accepted that's part of what Bitcoin is. But I essentially pay zero mental energy to these arguments. I think that they don't matter overall. So maybe not a great answer. Maybe other people will hate this answer on both sides, and I get yelled at all the time also for not taking a position, or how could you possibly not be boldly yelling about Bitcoin right now? I don't know. I've seen enough of these fights come and go, and I think that they're largely irrelevant. And I think maximum conservatism is my base case, and none of these things have bubbled up to the point where I think that they matter today.
I love that. It mirrors my opinion a lot. But
I will say it's good that people are fighting for what they believe, right? Like, what is Bitcoin? It's a bunch of UTXOs and people who own them, and then those people sharing how they think the future of Bitcoin should be. And so I'm glad Bitcoin has this like aggressive infighting. I genuinely think it makes the platform stronger. Now you alienate people. It looks weird to onlookers. Like I remember in 2017 coming on Twitter. Do you ever remember Kevin Pham? He might have been done with Bitcoin publicly by the time you joined in 2020, but he was like what people would say are like the bad versions of Bitcoin maximalists on Twitter. He was super aggressive and dismissive and rude and all these things. When I was still figuring out like Ethereum versus Bitcoin in 2017, I came onto Twitter and I saw this crazy Bitcoin, and I was like, oh yeah, the Bitcoin people are nuts, right? And so I say that to illustrate the point that although the infighting is good for Bitcoin, it hardens us, it sharpens the narrative, it like lets the project lets people stay vigilant over the project. Onlookers think we're nuts. Why are these people so emotionally engaged in an asset? Right? Like traditional financial background would say, don't marry the asset, make good decisions, etc. And Bitcoiners are like, no, I married the asset. I got a tattoo of it on my body and I'm all in. And people will say that that's crazy. But I think it's actually necessary, right? If you're saying you want to create a new upstart money to overthrow the centuries of monetary order with some software, yeah, you're going to need some ideological zealots to help push this thing forward. The earlier in Bitcoin's life, the more that's true. Over time, the less it's true. Yeah, that's my overall take. Like, I'm glad people are fighting and glad people care. None of these things matter long term.
I love that. Yeah, I might think that it's even good that we have more Bitcoin clients that get more popular. So like that we have like this things. But I like your I like your answer a lot. My next I've never done that, but my next guest will be Bitcoin mechanic, so it will be probably a different episode. So people can look forward to that. Really cool. We have one end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is always asking the next guest the question without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question. It's a fun one. When do you think the first Bitcoin transaction on Mars will be happening?
Oh, love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, let's think about the question first. Does this mean I'm making an on-chain transaction broadcasted from Mars? Does that mean I'm making a layer 2 or layer 3, future layer 3 type transaction? Do you have an opinion on that?
I have no clue of knowing what he meant with it, but I guess a Bitcoin transaction might just be like on Bitcoin settled. But of course, if it's a layer 2, it still could be a Bitcoin transaction. I have no clue.
Yeah, so I'm going to draw on Drew Bansal's Bitcoin Astronomy series, which is amazing. Call back to previous era of content. He was essentially running thought experiments on, okay, if we're going to colonize Mars, what does that mean for Bitcoin? And one of the novel things that Drew brought up there is something called center of hash, which means where are the mining machines? Are they on Earth? If 100% of the hash rate's on Earth and you try to broadcast a transaction on Mars, the problem is that transaction takes like 7 minutes to reach Earth. And so you can't really maintain the ledger on Mars, which means Earth has the center of hash. Now you could imagine a world where we have miners in space and they like split the difference between Earth and Mars somehow to sort of like allow both planets to make on-chain transactions. But I don't really see that world coming very soon. So what Drew concluded was that you do need a new layer on Mars at a minimum. So you have deferred settlement on Mars. However, I think it was his second essay, he said, actually, due to the distance between the two and how long it takes, the speed of light and sending information, he believes that the incentive to colonize new celestial bodies will be driven by being able to bootstrap new proof of work coins. And so I'm just sort of like giving the philosophical stuff for people to chew on here. To the point of the question, I would guess 10 years is probably on the earliest side. And I think less than 20 years. So I would say 10 to 20 years would probably be my case. And I think Elon Musk will probably be the one who does it. I think you'll find that to be very cool. I think we'll get more of Elon's attention over time in Bitcoin land. And so, yeah, I think it'll be Elon Musk between 10 and 20 years. He'll do it on his phone. I don't know. I have to imagine it'll eventually go. Like, it'll be robots first, right? We'll send a bunch of robots. They'll do all the grunt work before we send humans. And maybe even 20 years is too aggressive. I don't know. But that's what I'll say. 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I think Elon is more of a silent Bitcoiner than we give him credit to. I mean, he owns a lot of Bitcoin with his two publicly traded companies. I think he probably owns a lot of Bitcoin also with his private companies. I think he also owns a lot of Bitcoin just privately himself.
Yeah, he said that. Besides equity in his companies, his next biggest holding is Bitcoin.
Which is crazy to think about. That's And this is the richest guy on earth saying like, "Oh yeah, I have my companies and I have my Bitcoin." Like that's the same thing that Jack Mallers and all the Bitcoin guys are saying. And this is not a Bitcoin guy. He's just like the richest guy on earth.
That's right. Same for me. I own Bitcoin, I own equity in Swan. That's like the vast majority.
It's a great setup. Own your
Yeah,
own company, own Bitcoin. That's it, and some cash to weather the storm.
that's it. That's all you need.
That's all you need. Thank you so much, Brandon. I think this was a great ending point for the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
Yeah, easiest is Twitter, at Quittem, B and then my last name. DMs are open. Come say hi. I love talking to Bitcoiners. So if anything sparked your interest, you got an idea you want to toss around, reach out. Been at Swan for almost 7 years, US-based Bitcoin financial services company. You can buy there, custody there, hold in your IRA, get a private rep, all the standard financial services stuff. And then in the last few months, we've launched several new products that no one currently offers. One I'd like to highlight is Swan Real Bitcoin Exchange, which we use RBX as the acronym for. And essentially, we heard from our clients that a lot of people were stuck in Bitcoin ETFs. Let's say their first Bitcoin exposure was an ETF, and now they want to hold physical Bitcoin. And especially if you're stuck in GBTC. So let's say you bought GBTC low, you're up a lot on your position. And so you have a lot of unrealized capital gains that you don't want to pay taxes on right now. And yet you're stuck in GBTC paying 1.5% a year. And so there's a lot of Bitcoin trapped in that position. And so we created a product, RBX, which allows our clients to convert GBTC into or ETFs, but most advantageous with GBTC. So you convert it to Bitcoin. Now you can custody it however you want. And all of a sudden you don't have to pay that 1.5% annual fee. And this product defers the capital gains tax. So no tax hit day one, you maintain cost basis going forward, and yet you now hold physical Bitcoin, choose the custody model you like with that. And so this is brand new, clients are loving it. Doesn't apply to a large number of clients on a percentage basis, but the clients stuck in GBTC are loving this thing. So swan.com/RBX or DM me if you have questions, but really, really proud of that one. And hoping we can get a lot more spot Bitcoin holders out of this one.
I love that. And so you only have to then pay taxes, obviously, when you sell it, and it's just like deferred till this point. That's awesome.
That's right. Yeah, no capital gains tax on the transaction, but your cost basis goes to the spot. And so at some point in the future, yeah, if you sell it, you'll obviously pay cap gains, but you can get out of that 1.5% fee day one and do self custody or any other custody you want.
And 1.5% fee is a big chunk of money if you hold some Bitcoin. Like that's a lot. Like I don't recommend paying more than 1%. And even 1% is already like quite some chunk of money that you can probably you can get cheaper Bitcoin custody over a long period of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even IBIT or Fidelity's ETF, they're charging like 25 bips instead of 150. Right. So GBTC is 6x over market rate, and it's just a cash cow. So they don't want to change it because they know people are trapped in that don't want to pay capital gains today trap. And so they get to monetize them until RBX comes out, and hopefully we drain that a little bit here.
That's fucking awesome. Also, the last point before we go, I want to mention is I just realized, or like it made me think of like your answer because you mentioned Twitter again. Like I think 99% of all my guests mentioned Twitter at the end. It also shows the major network effects coming back to our discussion. But anyways, thank you so much, Brandon, for being on the podcast. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us. So there's always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.